All right, King Killers. We got a bonus episode that we're releasing here. We did a recording with someone we came across on Reddit. He had a really interesting post that kind of ties in with our episode 4 through 6. It ties in with some of the stuff we brought up in those episodes. It's a theory on the Lackless poems, the creation stories that Scarpy and Florian tell. It lays out a case for the origin of the Chandrian signs, as well as what city the Chandrian might have destroyed and what went on in those cities, how they destroyed them. So it was a really good conversation. We did the video recording, but I had to use my old laptop, and for whatever reason, my video did not sync with my audio, and it's just entirely too distracting as a video. I'm going to put up a still, which will have our pictures on there so you can at least see what we look like, and then for future videos we'll have the actual video streams that we'll post on whenever we do these kind of bonus episodes. But you'll see Rich is going to be the top right corner. I am the bottom right corner, and then you have Tim in the top left and Fitz in the bottom left. And you'll be able to at least see, our pretty faces. I apologize for Tim and Fitz. There's nothing I can do about their faces. That's just what they look like. But you'll at least get to see the glory that is my face. And really want to give a thanks again to Rich. It's really interesting conversation. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And we'll get on with the show.
Welcome back, killers, to the ostensible and actual utmost killer broadcast, King Killer Podcast. Tonight is a special night for all of us, especially, but not exclusive to, your host, Drippy Dick Dan, Quivering Prick Tim, and myself, Festering Pizzle Fissure Fitz. But tonight, breaking barriers, shattering previous paradigms, pilfering and plunging into the depths of audio audacity with our first and utmost noble guest, Chivalrous Rich. How are you guys?
Doing good. Thanks, guys, for having me on. I like that my alliteration is actually a compliment. I think that may be the first time in King Killer podcast history that's happened.
Yeah.
I
was even like telling Fitz, like, make sure you keep it a little toned down. And I guess I'm glad I said that, because I don't know where it would have gone otherwise.
I mean, at least I was just quivering. You guys are like festering and all. That was delicate, Fitz. Way to go.
Well, I've known a lot of the girls that you guys have known, and
jeez, dude.
But Rich came with the best background, so noble and chivalrous.
That's right. I'll do my best to live up to that.
All right.
Yeah. So, like, just to give the audience background, like we saw a post of Rich's on Reddit, and so it was interesting. It adds some different elements to the Lackless poems and some of the other stories around the Creation War and the Chandrian, and it was pretty interesting. So we asked him to kind of come on because we wanted to talk about that. It fits in with a lot of the stuff we talked about in episode 4. So if you haven't listened to episode 4, you'll want to check that out as well, because I think this will tie in well to it. But before we kind of go into it, though, like when did you start reading the books? When did you get into it? What's kind of your background on the books?
Yeah, I probably started, would have been 2014 or 2015. one of my friends, Jason, gave me a dog-eared copy of his Name of the Wind, and he's like, "Man, this is like my favorite book. I read it once a year, and just some of the things you've said about you just finished Game of Thrones. I think that you're really going to enjoy this Name of the Wind." And you gave it to me on, I think it was like a Friday, and I was going on a business trip leaving that Sunday. And so it was the book that I brought with me. And like the night before I flew out, read the first, like The Silence in 3 parts. And I remember saying to my wife, like, I hate it when people recommend books to me, man. Like this is just not going to be my thing.
Yeah.
And boy, was I wrong. So thank you, Jason, for recommending Name of the Wind to me. But yeah, so I read it on about 2/3 of it on the trip, and then came back and I saw him at church. Then the following Sunday, I'm like, man, this book is awesome. I don't know how he's going to tie it all together by the end. He's like, dumbass, it says it's a trilogy. Like it's over 3 days.
Yeah.
Like, so you can see that I started out a little less grand than my latest Reddit post in terms of my understanding of the Kingkiller Chronicle.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I read book 2 almost immediately right after that, and my line of work, I travel a lot, and so I got the books on CD and just kind of let them run in the car as I was driving around for that job for a couple of years. So I have no idea how many times I've read them technically, but round numbers, let's say 20. And more than actually having read the books, I've just listened to them. And I think that's kind of what's helped things stick in my memory, is just the listening kind of drilled in over and over and over again on long car rides all over the Midwest doing work.
Yeah, the Audible's one of the best of any books I've listened to. The performance is tremendous. That Nick Podell, right?
It's
so good.
It's funny, like you talk about, like sitting there saying that you didn't know how he was going to tie the end of the books. Like my cousin, years ago when the first Lord of the Rings movie came out, I didn't know, I knew of the Lord of the Rings, but I'd never read it or anything. And so he drags me to the theater, and I was like, man, I don't want to go see this. I was like, this looks like it's going to be some super nerd stuff. And then I get in there, and I was, immediately pulled in, was loving it. But like about 2/3 through the movie, I was like, how are they going to finish this story? And then it was like, it once it got to the end, I was like, hold on. So how many movies is this going to be? He's like, oh, it's a trilogy. I was like, oh, you asshole. I was like, I'm thinking I'm seeing the end of a story. It's like, now I'm going to have to wait years for this.
Then you get to the end of that third story, and it's like they got like 4 different endings. It just keeps going and going and going. Yeah. Much better on the read, though.
Yeah, that's what typically is the case, at least in my experience, right?
At least on that one, though, like, you got, I think those movies came out like 1 year after another. There was no, like, this one's a little different. Especially if you read this, read it when it came out, like, man, that's a long, a 10-year wait is a long wait for anything.
The cinematography on Lord of the Rings, forget about it. Excellent. Best one.
Forget about it?
Forget about it.
I should forget about it. Don't think about it.
Well, you can't see it in the movies, Tim. I'll tell you this: I can't forget it. What I saw in the movies. No, it was great. They're great.
No, it's funny though. I mean, they're on the Reddit threads. What I've noticed is a lot of people that have a lot of angst about this. They're very upset, man, that they've been waiting as long as they have. I kind of I came into it from Dan's recommendation. And I still waited like 1.5 years, 2 years from when he was recommending it, because I was just reading other stuff. Mm-hmm. And then finally, once I read it, I was just like, dude, why didn't you like more aggressively push this on to me? Because it's so good. So, it hasn't been, because that was probably 3 years ago. I kind of have a similar experience with like listening to them, where I'm not really sure how many times I've gone through book 1 compared to 2, but and I actually like 2 as the better book in my opinion. It's building on so much and builds out so much, but I haven't had that feeling of frustration, because we get to do this. I get to do all the pontification of what what's coming out of this. But maybe if it was 10 years ago, I'd be a little more frustrated. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel bad for
that worked up.
I feel bad for the people who've had to wait this long. I am not that patient. So I'm hoping just as soon as we get done with the second book of the podcast, we'll call Rothfuss up. It's time. Go ahead and put it out.
Yeah.
That's right. I think he's waiting for you guys.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, you just keep
Sure he is.
recording. He'll be done when you guys are done.
He's been waiting for this podcast for this whole time. He's like, someone's gonna nail it, and then once they nail it, then I'll drop it. So
we're all holding our keeping our fingers crossed on that one, Dan.
Yeah. all you out there, you're welcome for what we've done for you.
Yeah. Although at the same time, I think the wait has, like you said, spawned this Reddit community that is really active still. I mean, you would have thought that by this point it would have dried up, right?
Yeah.
Well, I also wonder if the third book was out, a year to 2 years after the second book, would people be pulling this much out of it? Would be making these many connections? Because you'd already have it made for you, right?
Right.
If book 3 was out right after, you wouldn't have to go through all this, or you wouldn't be encouraged to go through all this effort. And it's a big loss in a way, right? Because you don't have that exercise. Because I really enjoyed reading like what you did. Takes effort, and it's worthwhile, because when you go through it so much, it's pulling all those subtleties together. And it obviously is intentional on Roth's part, which is it's so careful and diligent or judicious writing, which is great. It's like it's like an artwork.
Right. Yeah, like we were talking kind of before we started recording. It is like almost like a Rorschach test of what do you take out of this. I mean, the number of theories I've read where it's just like, really? And then people are looking at my stuff and they're like, what? It's kind of your own experience, because exactly right. The stuff that when I read it for the very first time, I remember I went through and I'm like, is he gonna get enough money for tuition? Like I just like that was my biggest concern the entire time.
Yeah.
I'm a frugal guy in my own life, and so it's like, will he get the money? And now it's like, let's go back into all of this ancient lore and connect a bunch of different threads from across thousands of pages of literature to come up with what happened in the past background of the world that Rothfuss has built. And it's a very different way of reading it from the first time.
Well, that's such a compliment to the writing in itself. Like you said, the first time through, you get like 3/4 of the way through and you're like, wait, how's he going to wrap this up? And then when someone says, dude, it's a trilogy, you feel kind of stupid, but at the same time, you're just enjoying the book. Like those little reminders of what he could spend money on and how is he going to meet tuition? Is he going to get kicked out of the university? And those constant threats, it's just an enjoyable read, period. But to then be able to go back and make all those connections that you sort of just went past, it's tremendous. It's really great.
You can't when you go through it the first time, even going through both books, you don't realize how much he hid throughout both books, like how many clues are there, like especially like you go through the first book, like unless you read the second book, you wouldn't even know. There's no way you could know that was some of those things were even clues to begin with. So you need the second book, and I think it'll be the same with the third book. You need the third book to understand other clues that he's hidden in. But when you go through them and then you go back through, then you're able to kind of start putting pieces together, and then you realize, holy shit, this story's got a lot more depth than you realize. It's great just reading it, but it's got way more depth than you would be able to possibly pick up the first time you go through it.
Well, I'll tell you this, as I'm kind of getting into, I'm trying to stay away from any kind of Reddits or anything like that, but I'm talking to people here and there who are people who've read both books one time, and they're like, I waited 10 years. I read them right when they came out. And I think if you're a casual reader, you read them straight through, you could leave the table and go, those are great books. I can't wait for the third one to come out, and not realize, or at least not, without going back through a deep dive. Like I would have had without this podcast, I would have had, I mean, it's a credit to us, but no, but really, like you would have no, unless you actively were like going back and really more than a casual reader, really deep diving into it that first time and wanting to go back through and seeing what you missed, you may go through and say, "Oh, screw Patrick Rothfuss. He never came out with that third book," and forget about it, having missed all this stuff that we're talking about. And especially, I'm interested to hear what Rich has to say about these theories, because a lot of this stuff is still new to me, and they're you guys are keeping it a secret from me, and so some things are going to be revealed to me tonight, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I got to say, I am a little bit jealous of your situation, Fitz, where you're kind of going through it still for the first time, right? You're not 20 layers deep into it, and
That's right. I've been through it once. I'm coming back through it the second time, but all the, again, Dan told me to keep away from all the theories. Don't look into anything. Everything that's revealed to me on the podcast is fresh. And so it's good stuff. I enjoy the hell out of it.
Sure. Yeah. Like I say, I'm jealous because you're going to be able to read book 3 in a way that a lot of people who've been on Reddit for 5, 10 years now aren't going to be able to, right? You're going to kind of take the story as it is, rather than, I'm afraid that I'm going to be, what I had for book 1 and book 2, the first time I read them, I can't have for book 3. I've got too many wild hair theories going on, and I know too many other people's maybe not wild theories. There's almost a scorekeeping that's going to go on the Reddit page, I think, when the book comes out of, hey, I was right, or hey, the crazy guy with the theory about the cities, man, was he wrong? But that's part of the fun, and on the other end, there's been a lot of fun too, reading the theories and seeing where those evolved, and that is almost its own canon of literature at this point. That it's interesting to see who's kind of come on to Reddit and who was the kind of the flagship posters of theories, because at some point there was a first post of, hey, Natalia Lackless is Lorien.
Yeah.
Or there was someone who first came up with the idea that Bast is Felurian in quotes son. And so kind of going back, you have almost this Mount Rushmore of guys like Thistlepong, Geezer one that did amazing stuff early on, and then you've got and then they've been a little more quiet in the last year or two, and you get all kinds of new people posting theories, and it's continuing to evolve, and it's almost its own canon now within the King Killer series of all these various headcanons that we've come up with on Reddit. And so I'm happy to walk through my modest contribution to it. My goodness, this was a total YOLO post when I did it. I had no expectation that it was going to get received the way that it did. And ironically, some of the things that I've posted on there, I'm like, yes, this is my best stuff ever. This is the coolest thing I've done. They're like 5 upvotes, but we've got this one that went over 600, and I haven't done anything since. I don't know that I'm ever going to clear that number with 99% upvote. But anyway, to kind of dig into it, you guys in I think it's episode 4 of the show kind of go into the Lackless rhymes, and these were something that stuck out to me the first time that I read the books. Like, you read them and they're they got this kind of rolling flow to them, and they're really cool, and it sounds like this is important. I remember thinking, like, this is really this is going to tell me something meaningful about the books, and then spent 5 years trying to figure out what that was. Shower thoughts and that kind of thing. And so the first time that I read it, it's pretty simple. Was 7 Things has Lady Lackless, and they made all this they make all this noise about the 7 Chandrian. So I just kind of walked away thinking, the Lackless poem, the 7 things, they've got to be the Chandrian. That's like the number 7 keeps being hit over the head with those guys. It must be about them. And so I kind of had in the back of my mind that the rhymes give us something about the Chandrian. And I know that's different from what you guys had talked about. You said that it's like the keys to the Lackless door, the Lackless door itself, or the whatever that the door Cauticus talks about being on the Lackless lands. But that's, like I said, it's like a Rorschach test. You pick up different things, you interpret different things, and that becomes your expectation and your view. But as I kind of held on to this idea that the poems are about the Chandrian, I also developed this out of thin air idea that it talks about their curses or their signs. Because we go through Scarpy's story and we hear about Haliax ultimately being Lanray being cursed. At the end of it, to be hamed in shadow, and there's other things sprinkled throughout the stories. I think it's Jacob and Cobb argue whether the Chandrian were the first 7 to deviate from Telu's path. And you talk about there's other places where it might refer to them as being cursed, and so kind of in the background years ago, I thought, hey, this is probably what's going on. So like literally, this has been rolling around in my head in the car with me for a couple of years. And so with COVID and nothing better to do, I sat down with a notebook and just started kind of writing out, okay, you've got these 2 rhymes, and let's kind of match them one for one. And a lot of people have done this. I'm certainly not the first to have sat down and said, okay, let's match the boys rhyme and the girls rhyme, and it's hard to do. The boys rhyme really straightforward. 7 things as Lady Lackless, and then he names 7 things. The girls rhyme is all over the place. It's or 7 things stand before the Lackless door, and then the girls was 7 things as Lady Lackless, and then she names like 10 things, and it's not really clear how you would fit them under a dress. So there's all kinds of debate what that is, right? And the first 2 lines they call out pretty straightforward. 1, a ring that's not for wearing. 1, a sharp word not for swearing. But then you get into all this stuff about husband's candle and in a box, no living locks. There's a riddle. There's a road. Like, what does all of that stuff mean? And so kind of the first stage of the journey was trying to line up those 2 poems as best I can. And so in the post, I go through and I kind of match the obvious stuff first. And everything that I do throughout the post is I want to show my logic so that people can say, yes, that's a good argument, or no, that's a bad argument. And then I tried to be transparent and honest of saying, hey, this is an area that I think I break down, or this is an area where I'm going to make a leap here. Everybody jump along with me or push me off the cliff. But in any case, the ring appears in both poems. There's a word that appears in both poems. A candle appears in both poems. A door appears in both poems. And then there's some language, there's a secret that she's been keeping. She's been dreaming and not sleeping. And then they talk about a tight thing that's held in keeping, and then comes that which comes with sleeping. And that tight thing, I think, is the secret, right? That's the match, secret to a tight thing held, because Quoth goes into, Teckham's thoughts on secrets and, how they're kept. So I think there's a connection there. So that leaves me with a time that must be right and a son who brings the blood with no obvious match. And so, then that is kind of where I broke down. So kept trucking along and said, okay, well, there's other stuff out there, right? There's the Adem poem, there's the Moth and Pot, there's Scarpy's story, there's other, there's this children's skip rhyme that, address all of these things. And so went through and tried to begin to see what else was out there that could fill in the gaps. And so I kind of took the stand that it's box and the box and the rocks are the two other things that leaves out the road and the riddle, that could be alternates. It didn't really explore those in the post, but stuck with box and rocks and let's keep going. So then,
hey, Rich,
yeah,
can I pause you for a second?
Yeah,
okay,
please.
Because it's all really fresh to me, so I just want to concise. So far you've gone through the little girl's poem, which is the one that Kavoth gets in trouble for saying in front of his mom, and then the little boy's poem that we hear later on in book 2.
That's right. Yeah.
Can you go through the specific 7 again that line up the each one of them, how they line up?
Let's do this, because he breaks it down on when he's going through. He's got like the boys rhymes first, and so the things you have is a ring unworn, word that is forsworn, a time that must be right, a candle without light, a son who brings the blood, a door that holds the flood, a thing tight held in keeping. That then that comes that which comes with sleeping. I hate that.
That one doesn't roll.
I hate that.
Really
Yeah,
well,
I know.
does it?
I hate every time I read it. I'm like, wow. But such a weird sentence. But The things I'll go through, like the things you definitely tied to people on that, like the thing tight and keeping. You have that tied to Haliax.
Right.
Cyphus, you have a candle without light, and Great
Right.
Alcenti, word forsworn.
Yep.
So you can go through those on why you think those tie to those three for fits.
Sure. So I think the Haliax one is probably the most hit you over the head. And Haliax gets more description and more ink in the book than probably any of the other Chandrian over the course of these stories. Simply because because of the tie with Lanry. But in the Adim poem, they talk about how he's hated, hopeless, sleepless, and sane. And then you've got dreaming and not sleeping, and then another reference to the thing that comes with sleeping, which I interpret as being a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get kind of this sleep, dream, sleep, Haliax connection. And then Cyphus is again pretty straightforward. You've got the blue flame and the candle without light. Those are fire related things, and we'll see on the moth and pot that there's another direct fire connection. And then Grey Dalcenti, there's nothing in the poems about the Russell Athletic gray sweatsuit, and
It's inferred. It's inferred.
Yeah, it's a clever reader will know exactly what I'm talking about. But again, there's this connection between word and speaking, and that gets me 3 of the 7. So I'm feeling pretty confident at this point, but I've still got some big gaps, and so it's kind of time to move on, right? Because I can match I've got the 7 signs from the Aden poem, but the rest of it becomes really confusing. There's no doors, there's no floods, there's no rings in the Aden poem, so. This is where it begins to be more of my conjecture and less about what we have real evidence for. So the next source that I looked at is the moth and pot. Right, we get Nina talks about it twice, and there's 3 things that she's really certain about that we can take away. One is the man robed in shadows with the phases of the moon, which is, we assume, Haliax. And quote says that straight up. Second is the man with black eyes. And what's interesting about the way that she describes the man with black eyes, who quote tells us he recognizes as Cinder, is that he's standing on water. And she doesn't just say like standing on water or standing on ice. It is like she says water at least 3 times, like man standing on water. I tried to paint the water, like it was hard to paint the water. And that to me was a standout clue, because Rothfuss doesn't waste ink. He does things very intentionally.
We talked about that too, about how he kind of glides and moves like he's on Mercury all the time.
Yep.
Or moves like Mercury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of fits with him in the description, like you say, that he seems like a nimble fellow, that Cinder. And there's also this coldness that's part of him, which I would have thought is like that's supposed to be ice. Right, and it would be would have been very easy to say that he's on ice, and we would all have been like, "Yeah, he's on ice. Okay, makes perfect sense." But the fact that he's so chilly and on water was what stands out to me. I'll tie that one back, Fitz. So keep in the back of the mind that I'm making a big deal out of water because Nina did it, and I think it's important. And then the last one that she talks about at length is the woman with no clothes, and she's really confident about that, and she blushes and she's real embarrassed, as a small kid might be seeing a picture of a naked woman drawn on an ancient pot. And I suppose that's got to be awkward for a kid. But
they got bad porn collections in the Kingkiller Chronicles.
Right, for a universe that is based on a strip club, as you guys have said in the past, it really does seem to have a dearth of pornography. But in any case, then Nina goes through then these other characters that are on the pot. Right, there's a woman holding a broken sword. There's a man by a dead tree. There's a man with a dog biting his leg, and then she just says fire. So that's more things to go on, right? So now I have at least some image of the Chandrian, but the stuff that's around them sounds nothing, in some of these cases, nothing like the Aden poem, right? There's there's nothing about dogs biting legs in the Aiden poem. There's no, really nothing about that in the other two rhymes. So either I'm crazy, or this is what Lorien's talking about when she's saying they have multiple signs, or they could all be together, and then like how that jumble goes. So I just kind of plowed ahead and said, okay, what do we know about all this, and where can I make some logical leaps? And that's where I fit Cinder in. So fits to get back to this idea of the water and why that's important. One of these signs is the door that holds the flood. And that's the boys' rhyme. He talks about the door that holds the flood. And there's a different description for that in the girls' rhyme. She talks about it as a door without a handle. And so kind of looking at that, I'm like, all right, I've got a door without a handle that holds a flood. And my, kind of thinking of what could that be, or how would a child describe something like that? What would they be describing? Kind of concluded it would be a dam. And the flood connection, man standing on water and the flood was where I said, okay, I think this is Cinder. And once I got there, it sort of becomes just a logic game to figure out where the last three are, because now I've got something really deep, right? Everything that we know about Cinder, you might think that he's going to be described with black eyes or white curly hair or good swordsman or moves like Mercury, moves like Jagger, that kind of thing that doesn't appear in the poem either. It's this weird connection. Why is he on water on the pot? And what is this door that holds the flood? So kind of going back through everything, this, there is kind of a breakdown then here in the theory where Nina mentions the genders of all of these remaining Chandrian. And, two of them are men, one's female, but, none of them are naked, and they don't necessarily match with what, kind of some of the other things in the theory that I will connect later. And so again, the amazing thing about the Reddit community is that you have so many smart people out there lending different talents to the lore. So there's one of the things I appreciate the most are the folks with a linguistics background that are posting on Reddit, and then folks that are multilingual and read the books in foreign languages and then come back to us English only speakers and say, hey, this is an interesting difference between the books, or hey, this language, my language, you can't not have gendered language, and these Chandrian are described this way. And I link one of those posts that match the Chandrian by gender, and it's different than what Nina says. And so I'm kind of stuck with, I either have to take a leap here or I have to say that Nina's wrong. And I guess it was more convenient to say that Nina was wrong. But but there's reason for that. Again, anytime I try to make these leaps, I at least try to have some, no matter how thin, textual backup for it. And the backup for it is that, one of the things that we see with Quoth and his own dealings with his world is that he can be confused as to who's what as well. That with the Adim, when they come and see Tempe playing the lute, he admits that he doesn't, he has a hard time telling Adim men and women apart. And then,
when he sees the girl that he ends up fighting, he initially thinks she's a man.
Right.
And she walks up on him, and it's not until he gets closer that he realizes it's a woman. I forget her name, Casseret or something like that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and then there's another instance of it too at the Aeolian, where right after Sir Savian and he's looking for Denna, he makes it up to the third circle. Yeah, and he sees the two guys that are up there and mistakes one of the guys for Denna. So Nina says that she sees these things in half a moment. Her dream only shows a few sides of the pot. And so she's kind of reiterates those sides of the pot, and so there's a possibility that she's just wrong, right? And that's what I'm hoping for. And this is one of the areas where if you don't like my theory, you can break it right here by saying, "Hey, you got these Chandrian wrong."
Which gender was the one that you're questioning? her on.
So Sturkis, who's got to be a son who brings the blood, is described as a woman holding a broken sword. And so that one becomes a bit of a problem for me. But Sturkis in all of the I won't say all, but in the kind of translations that I've seen posted on Reddit, they're often most often describing Sturkis as male, and then Dulcentia, Alenta, and Usnea as female, and that lines up just fine.
Yeah. I
So-
mean, it also it could be that it's a woman holding this sword, but the sign is still pointing at Sturkis, but maybe he can't hold swords because of whatever because when we talk about like these things, I agree. I think they're curses. I don't think these are like magical powers that they have. So if he's in thrall of iron, like I'm always trying to figure out like what does that mean? Maybe and the only thing I can think of is like maybe he can't use it, like he's incapable of using swords or things like that to be able to fight with, and so maybe when they're showing the woman holding the sword, it could just be a pointing to his sign, and the reason it's a woman holding the sword is because he can't hold swords or something along those lines.
Right.
I don't know, but it's tough to gauge like how being in thrall of iron is a curse. I don't even know what that's the only one sign that I'm like, well, how I don't know what the curse would be there.
Right. Yeah. And my best guess on that is that Sturkis is the one that turns turns metal to rust. Right. And we get that in the children's skip rhyme later on here. But yeah, it is problematic. And there's other people on, other theorists out there. Balloon, who was one of the folks that, really pushed me on a number of points in the theory, says, I think that Sturkis is in fact female, and the sword is representative of the Adem swords. And you're broken, that actually belongs to Dulcenti and not Sturkis. And at the I don't know, we'll find out. That wasn't the direction that I took, but I think it's an interesting submission to the discussion.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a couple of interesting things that just jumped out at me. Like one, I could definitely see Nina as an unreliable source, just given that it's all kind of dreamlike. She's a kid. She only saw part of the pot. None of it was like, it was very fast. She's accessing all these things from memory. So that's definitely something that could be definitely understandable. But also with Cinder, I thought I remembered at some point there was a description of him having eyes like ice at the bottom of a well. Like the color was, do you remember that?
That is from Kavos' memory of Cinder.
Oh, okay.
He was like, he's talking about like why he can't forget Cinder, and what, like, I can never forget, this man. I can remember his face better than my mom's, and the man with eyes like ice at the bottom of a well. It's one of his memories. I can't remember the exact point in the books, but that's from his memory of Cinder.
It jumped out at me because you were talking about water. You're also talking about ice with Cinder. So just kind of another layer of connection where, yeah, that makes sense. And we talk about that a lot, where there's, you have all these little things that are mentioned, and you don't know at the time that it's going to mean something, and then it does end up, because you pile them up. Once you pile them together, then there is this interconnectedness where you can get, you can pull more evidence towards different things about people like the Chandrian, or individuals like the Chandrian. I haven't thought as much about the sex of the individuals, but I guess there is some relevance there for sure.
Yeah.
No, Tim's just been thinking about sex with the Chandrian.
Yeah. It was Naya, man. Can't wait. It sounds so good.
Yeah, but she brings the what is hers, the not the
she's the decay.
the decay.
I might hard pass on that one, Tim.
Yeah.
Here, one other thing I thought for Sturkis as a son who brings the blood could be hermaphrodite. I mean, what's a son who brings the blood? Like, got both things going on, androgynous, maybe.
How would you come up with that? I don't even know.
Son who brings the blood, like monthly blood,
Oh, Jesus!
Wow.
Hey, it's a natural occurring phenomenon.
It is, but for you to think of it is
Hot,
very
too.
strange.
It's hot.
Yeah, it's hot.
Yeah, that is at least 700 upvotes on Reddit, and I'm not even joking. Like the guy whose
See?
theory that the Felurian pegged Quoth actually has outranked
Yeah.
mine. So
That was the by far the grossest theory I've read in a long time. Like I've been reading it. I hadn't been posting on Reddit in the beginning, but I just recently started like commenting on Reddit. But I've been reading it for years, and I had not seen someone made the case that Felurian is actually Kavoth's mom, and I was like, that's super gross. Like
No
I
incest,
don't
huh?
think that's right, but if that's
Also
right,
hot.
Rothfuss is writing a much different book than I initially
Yeah.
anticipated. He's
Yeah.
Man,
he's
that
like
changes things.
he's like, taking George R. R. Martin and like, oh, I can top that.
yeah, here, hold my beer. Right?
Yeah.
My King Killer will do crazier incest
Yeah.
than your King Killer in the Game of
Jesus.
Thrones.
Mother consuming the son. Ugh, gross.
Yeah. But all right, so we got, tying that back in. So we got Haliax, Cyphus, Grey Dalcenti, and Cinder. Then the last three that we're trying to figure out is Ring Unworn, Son Who Brings the Blood, Time That's Right. Son Who Brings the Blood, obviously you're tying in with Sturkis.
Right. Yep. And
The
that
sword and the iron.
Yep. Yeah. So there's kind of a thin, I admit that it's thin, tie that I make between the iron that he's in thrall of and the blood, right? And the lightning tree, there's a segment where it talks about how Bast is really put off by the scent of blood, and it's implied that it's the iron in the blood. And like I said, if I take a leap, I try to have at least some thin references to where it came from. Why did I think that? And that's my link there, which kind of leaves us with we've got the dead tree for somebody, and then we've got a dog biting a leg. Alenta brings the blight. There's my dead tree, and so by process of elimination, Grey Dalcenti's Russell Athletic sweatpants are getting chewed on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I go through like, because they and what's the guy's name? The orphanage guy.
Trappist.
Oh,
Trappist, yeah.
Trappist.
In Trappist's story about Telu, when he goes through, it seems like, in the way I read it is that the different descriptions of Incanus, I think it's kind of an amalgamation of, the Chandrian and the Cthaeh. And like you got, because you have the signs that match with Haliax, you have signs that match with Cinder, and you got the iron, iron rusting and all these different signs. But then there's also like driving people crazy, driving animals crazy, and then Arledin mentions animals crazy. The only person whose sign you would think makes any kind of sense with driving people mad would be Grey Dalcenti, like, because it doesn't fit at all with any of the other signs.
Right.
That, unless Haliax has a superpower that we is not discussed. The guy who doesn't talk, you could see that could be something where if he does talk or just his presence drives people in crazy, that seems to be the most likely one that would tie in with that. So we actually talk about that in episode 7. So that definitely agree with you on that one. As far as dog biting the leg, it's got to be Grey Dalcenti.
That was interesting because that spun us in a completely different direction. Because up to that, we were just speculating in ridiculous manner about Grey Dalcenti,
Yeah.
which is why he has the duster and all that stuff. We just made him like this super cool guy because his power was so weak. It was just like, this guy doesn't speak. What's that? But then when you start to apply it, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I can't think of a character in another book where they're cursed in that way, where if they speak, everything around them goes crazy. It's a cool thing to sort of consider. And I don't even know if by episode 7 it had been planted in my mind by Dan that these were curses rather than powers, because I was just considering them as powers for whatever reason, but I hadn't considered them more as curses, which it makes a lot of sense because Haliax is obviously cursed. These aren't powers that he has. you know, although
Yeah, and it's
all
explicitly
powerful.
stated that he's cursed. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and Scarpy's story, Celatos specifically and explicitly curses him.
And Denna's song is the Song of Seven Sorrows. So again, my limited math skills, anytime I see the number seven, I assume it's the Chandrian, right? And since she's kind of we assume pro Chandrian or pro Lanray in her story, to describe these as sorrows kind of does, there is a whole segment out there that suggests the Chandrian are actually victims, that they're being unfairly punished, or that they aren't the ones that killed Quoth's family. There's there's a surprisingly large pro-Chandrian element out there. So curse is kind of a nice fit between. It's not necessarily a power, not necessarily a reward. That straddles the line there.
It gives Rothfuss enough room to add some gray to the Chandrian, because I don't think they're going to be heroes. I mean, just what they do and how they react, especially how Cinder reacts to Kavoth after Kavoth walks up on his entire family being slaughtered and he's taunting him like that. To me, like, you can't go and make them the good guys after that. That's just too messed up.
Right.
It's because to like spin it and like, tricked you, they're actually good guys. Well, you were too manipulative. Like,
Right.
you can't have like how Cinder reacts and then spin that into they were good guys, because and then it's like, it's not a clever trick. It's like, well, yeah, you tricked us, but it's because you wrote it in a way where it's impossible like to not look
Right.
at that and like, that's messed up. So like, but if they're cursed and they're being tormented throughout thousands of years, then you could spend some gray into it and have some understanding why they're sadistic and why they're doing what they're doing and why Haliax is hanging out with these guys that he obviously looks down on. He doesn't like the the treatment that Cinder is how Cinder's reacting to Kavoth. He obviously doesn't like it. So it gives room where you could understand why they're doing what they're doing. I still don't fully understand it, but he gives himself enough room to make it gray if it's a curse.
Can I throw something out real quick, guys?
Sure.
Something I've been thinking about, and this may be way off base, but is there a chance, or is anybody talking about possibly the Chandrian, their purpose actually being trying to, push their curses onto somebody else and die? And along with that, war, or the next war, if you follow what I'm saying, if we knew that Haliax got his start from Lanray, and he actually changed persons at that point. And I think what you're getting at, is getting ready to be the other kings, or the people who betrayed the people who betrayed the seven cities that
Right.
fell back then. And so those guys being cursed now, through time, or each war that comes, with the new group that the Chandrian goes out to try to find, being Kavoth and Bast, or whoever the next seven might be. Is this talked about at all?
No, I haven't seen anything.
And you don't have.
I haven't seen anything where it's talked about that they're passing these curses on to other people. I don't know. I mean, he could literally do anything with a third. Yeah, I know, but I mean, he could literally do anything. But I can't think of any evidence for that they're trying to pass on their curse to someone else. And like, why are they slaughtering? How is slaughtering these people who come across information on them? Like, there's just nothing in the books that gives you any indication that they would be trying to transfer their curse to someone else.
Yeah, that's actually a good point, and at the risk of taking us down a cul-de-sac away from what you guys brought me on, that's one of the things I'm working on now. Right, I've got as background, I have a 10-month-old baby who has a hard time sleeping, and so I have a lot of time in the dark to just sit and think. And while I'm holding him while he tries to fall asleep, and one of the kind of my holding the baby thoughts was, you've got the Chandrian, and they're destroying everything about themselves, and you've got the Amir, who also seem to be destroying everything about themselves. I think Coffee Purist was the poster that first kind of turned me on to this. Like, hey, they're both doing the same thing. That's never put side by side in the books, but it seems really coincidental when you say it out loud that they both are doing the same thing, which leads me to, are they doing the same thing? Right?
Yeah.
They're, they could either be just, so I'm right now the grid, because I like grids, and at the risk of becoming grid guy on Reddit, I'm looking at the, are they destroying just works of themselves? Are they destroying works of both, works of neither, or works of the other? And what does that mean? And I think with, basically those 16 options, you can kind of figure, somewhere in there, it's one of 16 options as to what the plan is.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to suss it out that way. But yeah, it's strange that they're destructive in that way. It's also strange, spoiler for the forthcoming theory, someone lives every time we see a Chandrian, which explains how people know this stuff anyway. Quoth lives through his parents' murder. Denna lives through Moth and Farm, and then, sorry, Fitz, you've got the sentry at the bandit camp that they see his tracks running off in the distance. He lives. Someone sees all this at least once, and it's either an elaborate frame or it's intentional or it's part of what they have to do. I don't have a good answer for a lot of that, but there's, I think there's enough logic out there that I think we can get to either what the plan is or isn't. And I'm working it, but that'll be another guest appearance.
One thing about the Amir, I don't see them as trying to destroy information. I think they hide their information in plain sight, because there's a lot of discussion about, like, there's things written in books, like you have on what's the guy they get all their medical information from.
The Duke of Gibeah, his
Duke of Gibeah,
his book.
Like the outline of the book has hidden information in it, and then one of the books where there's the children's rhymes about children's stories about the Chandrian, like Kavoth talks about I can't remember the word they use in the books, but it describes like there's like a scroll, like around the edges. I think this is like clear that they're hiding information in plain sight and speaking to each other. It seems like the Amir are trying to keep people away from the Chandrian, but also trying to communicate with each other secretly, where like the Chandrian seem to be trying to wipe out, their name from people, anybody who speaks about them, they're killing everybody. We haven't come across stories where the Amir are, slaughtering people who are speaking about them, or, like there's no example of like, someone like Scarpy, if he was going around telling the same story Arladin, you would expect like the Chandrian would be after him, but there's no counter to that where like the Amir are being. Now it could be hidden in the background.
Sorry,
maybe what happened to Denna.
I think I could toss a nerd response to that, but I'll let you. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's what I'm saying. It could be. That could be what we find out happened to Denna. Is like maybe she's like the exact opposite of Kavoth, where the Chandrian went and wiped out his family. Maybe the Amir went and wiped out Denna, or it could be that the Amir wiped out Kalabtenna, and
Right.
so I mean it could be that. It's just we have the direct evidence that the Chandrian are murdering people viciously, and we don't have any direct evidence of the Amir.
Yep. Yeah, and then it would either be an extremely elaborate frame job, and the Chandrian are just really bad at timing.
Yeah.
Or,
that's the weird thing. Like, what did they show? They just show up after a massacre and like, why? There's a fire here, so we might as well take a seat and relax in the midst of all this blood and gore.
Right, hang out and then act like assholes to the poor kid that just walked in on his family dead. That's what I would do if I were in that same situation. That would really help spread innocence.
Yeah.
A very strange coincidence. So we talked about that in one of the more recent ones that we recorded, where we were saying like there's a serial killer going around through this world, then they keep taking credit for his
They
murders.
just show up after the fact because they want credit for the murders, but they're not actually doing them. They just want the glory.
And that would make them especially sick, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So one way or the other, they're
Strange.
not. It's hard to paint them as the good guys, but again, there's people out there that do. Yeah, so sorry, I've taken us down like this horrible, cul-de-sac way off of what we were originally talking about. But to kind of bring it back at the end of the Moth and Pot, right? I've got Haliax as the man with the shadows. Ferula Cinder is standing on water and snow. You've got Cyphus, who's just fire, because that's all Nina tells us. Great Dalcenti, the dog biting the leg, and Pale Alenta with the dead tree because of the blight. Sturkis with the broken sword because iron rusts, and then Usnea is the one who's left with no clothes, which makes sense if she lives in nothing but decay. Her clothes are rotting off of her. So then I still haven't lined up everybody yet, and I go into a section where I look at the children's skip rhyme, which most all of this stuff is pretty one for one with what I've already done. So I won't belabor it, other than to say in my original writing of this, I took a flyer, and I admit that I took a flyer on it and just said, there's this line, stand alone, standing stone, and I matched that with Usnea. Later in the comments, I went through the rhyme again and kind of segmented it out. And I think that a better fit for Usnea would be the line that move like ghosts from place to place. Mm-hmm. It still fits with the narrative that I pin on Usnea, like the great game of Clue that I'm playing in this theory. It still works, and the logic would have gotten me to the same place. But that's again an example of why Reddit is so cool, is because people will read this and they actually care and they give you good feedback. Yeah. And if you're not too arrogant to accept that feedback, it'll make you better. And that's kind of how I approached it. And really appreciate everyone who either pushed me or complimented the work here. But yeah, at this point, then I kind of had everybody lined up except for these final pieces of the girl's rhyme. And by process of elimination, I get there again, like we talked about, Sturkis with the sword and bringing the blood, and we already covered that. And then that leaves the woman white as snow as Pale Alenta. And at so now 2/3 of the way through my 40,000 word essay on the Chandrian, I get this finished grid that like lines up every one of the Chandrian, every one of their signs, the Moth and Pot, the two rhymes, and the children's skip rhyme. And then I finally get into the actual theory, right? So there's all this preamble that I've just bored your poor listeners to death with, is in there, because if I had just jumped in and said, hey, I think the Chandrian, their signs are what they did to the cities, and I think I can use that to tell you what cities they destroyed without any of the other proof, I think this probably gets laughed off Reddit. There was one of the commenters even said, like, I came for the batshit insanity and I stayed for the really good theory. Something paraphrasing it. But in any case, so we've gone through the theory part. Now I get to the batshit insanity, which is what did these people, what did they do? And so, this is the part where it's just pure conjecture, right? It almost borders on fan fiction. And, I appreciate that a lot of the theories on Reddit end up being kind of in the fan fiction space. People have an idea, something they really like. Skin dancers seem to be something that people really like and begin to develop theories behind. Some are very good. Others are like, I really like this idea of skin dancers. Wouldn't it be cool if X, happened because of them? This is where I kind of get into that. I say, look, I've got all this information about the Chandrian laid out in a grid. So here's what I think it means, right? My best guess based on the data that I've got. So what did they do? What's the murder weapon in the game of Clue? So Haliax, we already know, he destroys your Tyrannial, and Scarpy tells us that, and we hear that from Bast as well. The door with no handle that holds the flood, like I said earlier, that sounds like a dam. And so all I need to do is find in Timorant somewhere a dam, right? They don't talk about one in the books, but by God, I've got to prove this theory right, so I have to find a dam somewhere. We'll get to that. The candle with no light, I suggested is that the Siphus had a signal fire that he was supposed to light, kind of like Paul Revere. Didn't choose to do it. There's an awesome Futurama episode about that, it's kind of what was stuck in my head, honestly, as I was thinking about that. But you get a blue flame as your curse because you didn't light the light you were supposed to in the way you were supposed to. The son who brings the blood. I took that one as someone who commits patricide. A lot of people have talked about the son who brings the blood as, quote, being the Lackless heir. But to bring blood, I didn't quite go down the road that Fitz did. But
yeah.
You'll get there.
No one
You'll
ever
get there,
goes
Rich.
down the
Yeah,
road
you'll get
Fitz
there.
goes down. Fitz goes down his own roads. Like there's not anyone else is going down these roads.
Oh yeah, there is. It's me and Roth as thick,
Yeah, they're
thick as thieves.
Yeah.
I will buy you a beer, Fitz, if you turn out to be right. I promise.
All right, good deal. I'll hold you to it.
All right, and then, but as far as that goes, I said, brings the blood. That that could be interpreted a lot of ways. But one thing is, just bloodletting, right? Just slicing someone's throat and letting them bleed out. And the fact that it's a son, I'd say patricide. It could be killed a mother as well. But in any case, killed someone important in the family. Some kind of assassination of an important parent is how I read that. Number 5, again, thank you to the Reddit folks for coming up with much better ideas than I came up with here around the ring unworn. I read that and thought marriage left at the altar, probably some kind of marriage pact that was supposed to happen between an ally and the city, and Pale Alenta just leaves them at the altar, and that falls apart. But and all kinds of people, I think even you guys, Dan, you may have been one of the people that posted, hey, this ring is probably one of the type that Mellowin gives to Quoth, that's like the hey, you're an asshole ring and I hate you and hope you die. And that actually makes a lot of sense, and I should have thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something along the ring games, and obviously, if it's the ring games, though, the issue would be that how far back do these ring games go? Because this is 5,000 years ago, and
Right.
so it could be that these things trace all the way back. But yeah, I mean, it's impossible to know. Like on any given thing, it's impossible to know exactly what transpired back then. But it could be a number of different things. The reason I like the theory is on tying it to all their different signs, and that these poems and the pot and all these things are giving clues to why they were given their curse and what cities it was. Is it fits well with how the book is written. Like even just on the poem itself, the poem is written where most people are going to read it, and they're going to read it for the sexual innuendo.
Right.
But it could also be that there's clearly groups that are trying to, like with Denna and her song, there's clearly groups that are trying to put information out into the world, and they're trying to do it subtly and in songs and in rhymes. So it could be that someone, I don't even think it would necessarily, like our two theories would contradict each other. I think it could be that there's multiple different things going on in these poems, that it could be giving you multiple layers of different information, and they use and that's not only the sexual innuendo, it's also how to get in the Lackless door. It's also ties in with the Chandrian and their signs and what the city's done, because it makes a lot of sense with the guy bringing the blue flame, that his curse would be that he did not light a signal fire or something along those lines, because the curse, obviously, it's not just flame, it's blue flame.
Right.
And so that is definitely going to warn people that the Chandrian are coming by. Obviously, that's the blue flames is the biggest signal of the Chandrian that we see in the books, and that would make sense. And then there's the blue flame that's mentioned in Annalyn, so that would tie those two together. That Annalyn's the city that he brought down and betrayed, and it's what was the original city before? It's obviously called Annalyn now, but
I think it's Antis.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So I think there it can make. I think there's something there that we could be. It could be that these poems and these stories are giving multiple layers of information rather than just pointing at one thing. It's hard to know exactly what it's trying to give, but I think there is something there that there's more information in these poems than you would think just on one layer.
Right, and then the cool thing about the world that Rothfuss is building is that the different cultures seem to have and save and prioritize different things, right? Like the Adim have been passing down their poem for thousands of years. They have the Atos for the swords that everyone has to memorize, at length, and they can't remember the names of the cities. There's there's some pretty important details that the Adim have just kind of let slide in that section. And
that's great
they've
too.
survived in other places.
When she goes into that story, she does say, "I'm going to tell you this once. I'm going to tell you one time all these names," and she goes through all that. That's so important to be able to tie everything together. Who is it? She Dynasty?
Cheyenne, I think.
Cheyenne.
Oh, sorry. If there's an inside joke there, I don't know that one.
She I always have trouble with her name, but yeah, I thought the same thing because they have to go through that painstaking effort, and it's another one of those things that gives us a picture of Kvoth's memory and how great he is at being able to memorize, how quickly he can do it, because most people it's going to take them much longer. But yeah, that whole history of each sword and all of that, and then you try to put that next to they don't remember the names of these cities and all of that, and that again ties into what we were saying earlier about how there's different groups that are trying to eliminate their information from being known. And I mean, just the world building's tremendous, and that's what you were saying a moment ago. I mean, that's how their different cultures have different priorities, and I love how most it seems like they're all just like you talk about the Chandrian, they think you're a fool. It's like kind of like our world. I mean, if you think deeply about things, you're either a dork or you're an idiot or your priorities are messed up because you're like basically what you're thinking about is not worth thinking about in their mind, and that's how his world is. Like I love it when he first meets Arladin, and how the world. Or, wait, Abinthy. Sorry, when he first meets Abinthy and the Constable, he represents to me the schmuck that is most of the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that's most of it. And then you go to Adem, and it's like their culture seems so savage, but then pitted against Kavoth, he's the savage. I love that stuff, man. How different the cultures are and how different, different people that are at the university are. The world building's tremendous. I mean, Rothfuss he's done such a tremendous job in that.
So let's go through like how you came up with the different cities. So obviously Haliax, we know, Smear Terrennial, and then you came up with Cyphus bringing the blue flame, and you tied Antis in with Annalyn.
Yep. And that for exactly the reason that you said, right, is we don't hear much about Annalyn other than from Denna, and Denna we know is researching the story of Lanre and the Chandrian, we suppose from the title, The Seven Sorrows. So she keeps going to Annalyn a lot, and the only thing that she really tells us about Annalyn is that they've got blue fire there. They have blue flames, coal gas flames like an Annalyn, which you don't see anywhere else in the whole world. I mean, maybe they're all over the place in Modeg, and we'll never get to see them because Koth doesn't go there. But that seems really important that he's dropped that. That there's, or I guess I'll say, very coincidental that a city that begins AN and the other city that begin AN, could line up, especially on their spot along the stone road, and it's the one that has blue flame all over.
And like the guys that attack Kavoth in the alley, like they mentioned, like we don't want to have another fuck up like we had in Anilin. Anilin's it stands out too much for it not to have any relevance to to the story. Like it can't just be like a backdrop city because it's just mentioned too much. It's like Gil. Like Gil's obviously is important to the story. He just it's included in so many different scenes that there's got to be something to it. And so it would make sense that tying Antis and Anilin to the Blue Flame and Cyphus that would make perfect sense.
Right. Yep.
And then you tied Ferrule to Marilla. How did you come up with Ferrule for Marilla?
Yeah, that was the one where, remember, I said I've got to find a dam somewhere in Temerant, right? And that so would have been harder to do with the original maps in the book, but now with the 10th anniversary editions coming out, he adds a few geographic places that are marked with a cross. And one of them is in Ventus. It's called Deepin Falls, and it really, in that map, re-highlights the fact that there's these lakes up in the mountains near Severin. And there's this, landmark. There's only 2 landmarks on the map. There's another one that's like a ford over a river or something. Experts forgive me, I don't remember the name on that one. But you've stumped Mr. Baseball. There you go. That's the first one I don't have an answer for.
There you go.
But he has this place marked Deepin Falls, and it's there's lakes up in the mountains, water at a height that could come in and wash stuff away. And so using the map, that's how I matched Cinder with Marilla. I also I checked off some other ones previous to that, but like I said, the whole thing with water and Cinder, it comes back to here.
Yeah. And then so you had Grey Dalcinti Verret, which I thought this one was made a lot of sense. Cyphus and Grey Dalcinti were 2 of the ones I think that there's the clearest evidence that there could be something there.
Yep. Yeah, and the Verret is a city, like I say in the article, and there's an AE in pretty much every ADM city that we know. We don't know that many, but the ones that we do, we see this AE language. As one of the commenters posted, it could be Modegan as well, because you have Kershane. But in any case, you've got this AE connection with the city name, and then geographically it would fit along the Great Stone Road in the order that Scarpy gives the cities, and could explain why Nina sees the dog the dog biting a man's leg here is maybe she doesn't know because it's an Adem man or woman.
Yeah, and like in the ADM also talk about you bark like a dog. You
right.
There's a lot of talk about dogs and their disdain of that kind of that loud, boisterous type of person, and so that would also tie into that city and ADM and Grey Dalcinti as well.
Right. Yep, and that like I said, I would have picked a duck, right? But they focus on the dog. The dog is on the pot, and that's the one that we've connected with Dalcinti, who I guess blabbed a little bit too much or broke an oath, and now the city's ruined, and then forever
they heard that high pitched nasally voice, and they're like, "Nah, dude, you got no more talking for you. You're done with the talking."
Very good. I'll take that as a cue that I should speed up then, right? Yeah. Then kind of to round it out, we've got I have to pick one of these to be saved, right? Scarpy gives us 8 cities, and we have to pick one to be saved. This one was kind of a coin toss because there's a lot of debate out there in the theory on whether it's Tinue or Tenusa, or whether it's Balin, where we think the university was. And I felt bad because I've argued pretty hard for Balin being the city that was saved in other places, but here, assuming that all else is right, it felt like Usnea, who has this time that must be right, and moves like ghosts from place to place. A sneak attack feels like that kind of timing and the ghostly movement fits with that story. And we hear from Scarpy that Balin had a surprise attack. And we know that Lanray defends that, but then later, we hear in the story of the Ruach that the walls of Balin fell at some point. And there's a lot of debate that we don't need to go into on that. But in any case, I pinned the crime of Balin and the walls falling and the sneak attack on Usnea. And so she's cursed with nakedness because she caught the city unaware, and then is forced to, her decay, results in this nakedness that is symbolic of how the city was treated, caught naked effectively. So as a result, then I land on the side of Tenuwe or Tenusa being the city that was saved. And then, as you said, Cinder destroys Marilla with the flood from Deep and Falls. And that leaves two cities left, Emlyn, which we know absolutely zero about whatsoever, and then Marilla, which we actually do know something about. Felurian gives us a primary account of what life was like in Marilla. And there's one notable thing that she says about it, and that it has this amazing silver tree. And that if you eat it, your eyes glow, your mouth glows. It, probably was something that Rothfuss saw at the No Sympathy strip club.
Yeah.
And wrote it into the story here as
the fluorescent lights, man.
Right?
Like,
yeah,
man,
we're either
look
learning
at
a lot
Linda
about
up there, man.
learning a lot
She's
about
glowing.
But in any case, there's this tree that's really significant, like almost like the tree of Gondor, right? From Lord of the Rings, and you have Alentha, whose skin is white as snow, this kind of glowiness that's about her, and her symbol on the moth and pot is a dead tree, and she brings the blight. So this has nothing to do with the ring unworn, as many people correctly pointed out. And I have to admit that I sort of walk away from this whole marriage pact and the ring unworn, but the dead tree and the tree of Morella seem too closely fit, and the blight punishment seems too closely related to think that Morella wasn't the city that is related to Alenta.
Yeah.
And then that leaves Sturkis to destroy Emlyn somehow. And people criticize the theory as, well, you didn't develop that. And it's like, well, I need something. My standards, I need something to develop it with.
Yeah, well, like it's like saying, like, when you go through and you read book one, if you just read book one, there's a ton of clues in there. But if you haven't read book two, it's impossible to know so many of the clues. You wouldn't know they're even clues, because you need book two to know that a lot of the clues are clues in book one. So it could be a situation where a lot of these things we won't know definitively. I mean, for certain, we won't know definitively until book three comes out.
Right.
What are actually clues on a lot of these things. We can guess that this might be a clue, this might mean this might mean that, but we're missing so much information that it's impossible to know for certain on every little thing. It's impossible.
Right. I think that to a certain extent it will end like Lost, right? Not the ending in the church and all that weird stuff, but the end where there's a lot of stuff that just never gets explained, and it's like, hey, that's out there, man. And you're just gonna have to figure it out on your own. Or if we ever get more stories set in Temerant, maybe we'll get more information, but haven't been getting many of those recently.
I doubt he was ever going to tell us that Trappist was a part of the Minda religion, and someone figured it out and then asked him, and he's like, huh. He's like, yeah, absolutely. I don't know how the hell you figured it out, but yeah, he absolutely was. And so I think there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff in there where he's got stuff hidden. I mean, he said explicitly, I have things I've hidden in there just for myself. And he's like, and then some freaking dude will come and guess it out from underneath me. And he'll be like, I wrote this in there so that no one would be able to guess it. And then someone will guess it. And he's like, I don't know how they did it, but they do it. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions. And he says that explicitly too.
Most of the stuff he's talking about is the theories I come up
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
I
stuff
think
we're always like, what?
People are going to be very disappointed when there's nothing more to puppet. And I'll be one of them because I like them a lot. But, I don't know. It's just one of those things where you like, if you want there to be more about certain characters because they're interesting, but we don't know, you just don't know. So that's what's fun about it, right? All the speculation.
Yeah, and we got a sprawling community who's doing the writing on those things that I would never make some of the connections about Puppet that others have, that he's hidden Amir or whatnot. That it's just interesting what people gravitate to. And there's some stuff that's I know the theories or I've read them online, but I'm like I just not that interested in that part of the story. But apparently, I really like the Chandrian and rhyming. I found my niche. I found my 15 seconds of internet fame behind that interest.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I like.
I think it's good. Like, because I mean, obviously, Haliax tying him to Mirror Terrennial is obviously sneak attack, and then all the secrets around him.
Yep.
So I think that makes sense. And then the I just closed out the page, but then like Cyphus with the blue flame, that definitely would tie in with aniline
Mhm.
and making that be, and Antis would make a lot of sense. Ferrul and Morella, I think with the Cinder standing on the body of water, so you could say and Morella being by a body of water, you could see where it could be that he unleashed a dam, unleashed a flood on that city to bring it down. So that would make a lot of sense. Grey Dalcenti, Verret, the Adem, the Broken Oath, like those things, that would make perfect sense where that would all fit together on why he can't speak. Verret being tied to the Adem area of the Adem and the barking dog, all those things would tie together well. Pale Lenta with the tree and her bringing the blight, that all ties in. Sturkis is harder with Emlyn, but he's, when you bring in Uznea and you tie her into a sneak attack, and that's why she lives in nothing but decay. It's because she's left, bare naked to the world. Then Sturkis is the only one left,
Right.
and so then it's like, why he's the hardest one to figure out anyways, because it's hard to even figure out how being in Thrall of Iron is a curse. I
Right.
still don't understand that. So, but the rest of them, you could, like, they would all fall neatly into place. And even if every little clue from the poem doesn't tie into one of their signs or are tied into what their betrayal, like, I think some of them, I think there's a lot of weight to it, that it definitely could be that these things are tying the Chandrian sign, the betrayal, the cities they betrayed. I could see where all these things are like tying in together.
Yeah, that's the hope, right? Is at least was plausible and it tied together and was logical and supported by text. And if you're, like Pat says in the beginning of the first book, right? If you're going to do something, take your time and do it right. And I admit there's areas here that are not perfect, but at least if I was going to sit down to write a theory, I wrote one which is the kind that I like to read, which are heavily text based, which are kind of very logically laid out, that are plausibly true. And I think the one that Dan that you have out there right now about slow regard and kind of the echo between Quoth's day and Ari's day. I think that's another example of that, and the ones that kind of inspired it around did Ari do the plum bob? There's some really good stuff out there. I forget who the original poster was on that, but those are great and fun to read, and and that's what I hope to do here, is to write the kind of theory that I enjoy reading myself.
Yeah, that Ari one is because we had just kind of gone through the chapter where Ari gives him the gifts that are from Silver Card. So that's what we'd been talking about a lot. And so it's like just going through and doing research on those chapters again. And then it's just the trouble with the the books is in either theory, if you want to say that Ari did it or you want to say that she didn't do it, like the days don't line up. So it's like it's tough to figure out exactly what the heck's going on there, because Rothfuss talks about. So just for anybody who's not familiar, there's a theory that Ari is responsible for the plum bob, that she gave Kavoth the plum bob, and there's reasons you could interpret that. She has the same type of dress. She's got she has rouge makeup that she could use for the red lipstick. She's got the mirror, the comb. She's got the plums down there. So and she's she's an alchemist.
Mhm.
So there's reasons why you could think that she was responsible for it. But then when you start working backwards, like they say the day that they would fit it in that she would do it is the day where it's like she cried that whole day. And then they would tie that to that Modegan woman ran away from Kavoth bawling her eyes out. But that's, that third day for her, it just, in her book, it just says she cries. But the problem with it is, like on day 6 of Ari's, when Kavoth shows up, if you work backwards on what happened from the time Kavoth got the plum bob to that day, there's the day Kavoth goes to admissions and he sees Ari. That's day 6. There's 2 days where he stays in his room, so that'd be day 5 and day 4. Then there's a day where he tried to go and get everything, get stuff done. He went to the artificery, and then he tried to go in the under thing and tried to crawl through and find, go into the archives, but he panicked. And then that would be day 3. And then day 2 would be when he got the plum bob. And so it can't be that either Rothfuss made a mistake and when he described the few days after the plum bob and he just got mixed up on the dates, or she didn't do it on day 3. She would have had to do it on day 2. But day 2, we see how much stuff she does. Like there wouldn't have been any time. But there would have been time where she's outside at the end of day 2. She's outside walking around on the, in the open, and that's how day 2 ends. So it could be that she goes and sees Kavoth, comforts him, and then her center of her world's broken. So that's why day 3 she cries. So I can see why people would think that Ari gave him the plum bob, but the days don't line up. The days are described and they don't line up. But then the problem is either he screwed up on describing the days, or he screwed up when he talked about Will exchange chips with him, because Will's like, oh, you're a day after me, so he trades with Kavoth. So Kavoth should have been only had 2 days in between his and Fellas, but there was 3.
Mhm.
So there's a mistake, and one way or another, there's a mistake in the book. They both things can't be correct. The way the days Rothfuss described, there can't be 3 days in between the plum bob and Fella and his interaction with Will, his exchange with Will. There should have only been 2 days. So one of the two's got to be wrong. But it makes more sense to me that it just seems so out of character that Ari would be the one that gives him the plum bob.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And if she does, the method of delivery we're kind of led to believe is that the soaking wet glass that the woman hands with a glove on, and the glove he mentions is soaking wet. Sim tells us that the plum bob can just get in you through touch with your skin. So Ari would have to be coming down from just as big a dose, if not more, of plum bob than Quoth himself. And if it happens on day 2, like you said, she's having a fairly exciting and normal functional day, on day 2 at some point and taken the plumb bob in there, and it has no effect until day 3, or I don't know. I don't know how you explain that. I think exactly everything that you did, you really dissected that well, and it was a great, fun one to read, both the kind of the background and your response.
Yeah, if Ari is like sitting in front of Kavoth and she's giving him there's no explanation, like there's no indication why she would be doing this. And like the only things like I see people say is like, well, she needed more time for his gifts. It's like, well, hold on.
Jeez,
she needed more time, so she
shit.
doses him with the plum bob. Like, what the hell, man? Ari's a psychopath. Like that's beyond eccentric. And Kavoth, like with all his naming ability, he can't tell Ari is sitting in front of him in disguise. Like,
to not recognize her at all.
She's got some crazy power if she can disguise herself that well.
Yeah, I mean, with all the time they spend together, how well they know each other, it's hard to buy. Yeah, it's a hard one. That one just on its surface at the first intro, I'm like, I don't think so. But I read it, and plus, I get it. There's a lot of evidence to do that, and I think that's intentional.
And Rothfuss heavily implies that Devi is the one that gave him the, made the plum bob,
or at least made it. Yeah.
So and sold it to someone. Ari is not having someone,
make her
she wouldn't need it. She's an alchemist in her own right, and then it gets real convoluted because then it's someone went to Debbie and then gave it to her to give to Kavoth. But we see how scared she is to interact with people. Yeah. She doesn't, but she's making backroom deals and then going into bars dressed up as a Modegan woman. It's like, man, it just throws everything he's written about her, and it throws it all out of whack where it just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, I wonder if some of that, and this is all speculation, is just a holdover, because originally her story was supposed to be in Rogues, where we get the lightning tree. He was writing this rogue story about Arya, and he's like, no, that's not her. Like, I'll go write one about Bast that's also fantastic. But I wonder if maybe there was some inkling in there, and those are relics or remnants of that kind of breaking down and becoming her story.
Mm-hmm.
A question for you, though, that while I've got you here, and I can ask you guys questions. Sorry for hijacking the show, but I'm going to ask one while I've got you on it. So you mentioned the day that Quoth tries to get into the archives. I wonder, why is it that Ari doesn't seem to think that she's always about what day he's going to come? He's down in the Underthing early, right, to do that. And like they both kind of sail right past each other. He's like, yeah, I went down to the Underthing, didn't try to find or talk to Ari. I just went in and tried to break into the archives. And she's like, I'm waiting for Quoth, and he's going to come on day 7, and he's down here in the Underthing and totally unaware.
That's also why I think it can't be that she dosed him on day 3, because she stayed down in the Underthing, crying. And so like on day 4, she's down in the Underthing and she's down there the whole time. And so if she dosed him on day 3, how did they not run into each other on day 4? But if he got dosed on day so on day 2, if he got dosed on day 2 and then day 3 she's just crying in a room, then it would make sense that they don't see each other, as she's just laying in bed bawling her eyes out all day. And so that would make more sense to me, because it's got to be that there's got to be a reason that she didn't see him down there, and that's the only indication that she wouldn't see him is she just stayed in a room the whole day. There's no other time where it would make any sense.
Right. I think you've given a good explanation there on why that would be too. So thank you. That was one of the hanging questions I had on that.
Yeah, because there's he had to have gotten dosed on day 2 or day 3. It can't be any earlier than that. Can't be any later than that. No matter what theory you go with. So the only one where if he's walking around the Underthing on day 4, that doesn't make any sense, because she's doing stuff on day 4. She's out and about. Why wouldn't she see him?
Right.
So day 3 is the only one that would line up there where you could come up that I can come up with any kind of logical explanation.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny to go back and like slow it down and try to pick out the days, because that's one part of book 2 that really moves quickly as I read it. Every time I get to book 2 and I realize like, oh, he gets the plumb bob this quick, and then the pace just speeds up and it just starts going. It's so great. It's one of the great things about these rereads is like you know what's coming and you just look forward to it. And as soon as it comes in, you're just like excited about it. Like every time with Hem's class is just so satisfying to read.
Yeah.
I just love the Hot Foot is just fantastic, man. Great.
Tim, there was a post on Reddit somewhat recently where someone was talking about how much they hate that scene. They get so mad at Kavoth and the way he acted. And yeah, that was my reaction. I was like, man, we have the exact opposite taste in books. Like that's one of my favorite scenes in either book. It's so satisfying.
I can relate.
What kind of hero do you
I can
want?
relate to that guy. You know?
Yeah.
Jeez, man. I want my heroes to be straight and narrow. I don't want them to ever. Like, come on, man.
Do
It's
the
so
right
great.
thing. Both do the right thing.
He did do the right thing. Him's a piece of shit. In my book, he did the perfect thing. It was fantastic. Especially again because it's so early that he can't be held accountable, because it's so great how Him just set everything up to get himself just completely fucked over, and Kavoth gets off scot-free every time, basically. I mean, just about every time he gets money, comes out of it with prestige, ends up being the legend of the university. God, it's great. And he does get whipped. That does happen, but but outside of the whippings, it's great.
Yeah, I don't think we get to that stuff till it's probably like episode like 10 or something before we even get into that stuff. But it's yeah, we enjoy it. We enjoy very much him getting his his comeuppance. Dude's such a dirtbag. Like I just picture like all the bad teachers I had, and like you combine all their worst qualities, and it's like, yeah, it's him. That's him right there.
Yeah, it's like not polar opposite, but I don't know. My mind goes to like considering all the different teachers and how great Kelvin is and how great I mean, Loden's just like the best character, one of my favorite characters in all of literature. I just think he's so fascinating. And then you have him just sitting up there with the rest of them.
Who's your favorite character in the books, Rich?
That's a good question. I never really sat down and thought about it. I guess knee-jerk reaction, probably Tempe. Especially when you're listening to it on in audio, and you've got Nick Podell doing it in this kind of Swedish accent.
Yeah,
and just some of the things is like complicated, and it's like Tempe's one-worders are so good in a lot of places.
Yeah,
I love
the ass falling off. And,
I was gonna say that's my favorite.
That's such a legendary moment in the story where he's cracking up and everybody else is furious. What kind of stupid story is that?
It's like rolling on the ground laughing.
Yeah.
It makes me like Tempe so much more, man.
So I'm looking forward to getting back to that part, because I remember specifically when I went through the first time listening to it, having to pause because I was laughing so hard. Like then I come back, it's like Tempe's laughing too, like cracking up.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah, Tempe's good too. Like his, when they go into the bar and he's going to Kavoth, like he's got these guys and he's like, all right, you two, and like you can bring a girl with you too if you need the help. They think it's an insult, and he's being earnest. He's like, bring the women who can actually fight. That's his culture, but they take it as the woman takes it as a dig at her. But then when he's like, watch my back, Kavoth's thinking like, okay, I got to get his back, and like gets his knife out, and Tempe's just like, here, watch this. I'm about to fuck these dudes up, and watch how straight my back is when I do this. Like you're gonna see, watch my movements as I go and just destroy these people. And Kavoth's sitting there like, all right, I got my knife out, ready to jump in. Then he's just furious with Kavoth after that, which, it's like the Tempe being furious with him. It's like, okay, that makes sense. But you used an idiom that means, have my back, be ready to fight. Like no one should be expecting you to just annihilate 3 people in 30 seconds.
And that's what's fun about that character too, is Tempe's built up in through that whole bandit scene as being just this like unconquerable badass. It's like
Yeah.
without Tempe, the whole thing would have fallen apart. You certainly kind of feel like, and then you get to Edemre, and it's like, yeah, Tempe is better off as a sailboat than a teacher. And it's like just how shit on he is by everybody else in Edemre. It's just like,
Yeah.
Tempe's good, but all of us are better.
He's kind of our simpleton. He's okay. He's a good kid. He's a good kid. He's a little stupid, but
yeah, it turns out that he's like the Butters of
Edemre.
That again is what to me makes book 2 so good. The Lethani and the Mare and like the games with the rings. There's so much that builds the world out so much more, and it's to a much bigger status. And I when I see comments on Reddit about like, well, I missed the university. I didn't want him to leave the university. Yeah, I didn't either. There's every time he leaves something, I'm like, why are we leaving? I like this. Why are we going somewhere? But it's great. Every time the payoff is 100% worth it. But.
Yeah, I love the second book. I love because it's almost like 3 or 4 stories in one. I mean, they almost have their own distinct stories, but they're all extremely interesting. I mean, the bandits in Florian, the scenes with the mayor, and then the Adim stuff those are fantastic. Yeah. And what's part of the reason I'm like, take your time, make sure. I would rather the story come out in another 10 years if the payoff is worth it than to just put it out, because when he originally wrote book 2, there was no Lethani or the all the intricate parts of the Adim society weren't there. There was no Veshette, and all that stuff wasn't there. So like the Adim was just like he got there, he learned some stuff, and then he left, and there was no real time spent there. And so like that stuff to me is like what makes that book so good. And
absolutely,
yeah, if he's got to take time to figure that stuff out, take your time, figure it out, get it right, do what you got to do. I mean, this is gonna be his legacy. This is gonna be like Tolkien stuff, where people are reading this stuff long after he's dead. They're gonna be reading this series long after Rothfuss is dead. So no one's going to be 50 years from now. No one's going to be thinking about how long there was periods of time between the books. It's some kid is going to be listening to grandpa is like, when I read these books, I had to wait 30 years and walk uphill both ways to the bookstore to get it.
It's like Star Wars. Yeah. You hear people talk like that now. I had to wait 15 years for that to come out.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Fitz's favorite character is Crazy Martin.
Yeah.
I'm actually digging a well downstairs right now.
He's going to drown out the whole house like Crazy Martin.
Don't tell nobody. And I got barley outside too, growing in the yard.
Smart.
Nice.
Yeah, especially during wartime, man. Got to have that beer ready. Was there? I think we pretty much covered like the theory. Did like you guys have any kind of questions on it or anything you wanted to bring up?
No,
I am somewhat curious about the time that must be right, because what we've connected that to is like there's a time like where the Fae is like a portal. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the way we look at it is with the Greystones. So there's so much about the Greystones that obviously they're extraordinarily important, because once I started to realize they're important and I started to look for them in the book, they pop up all the time. There's so many mentionings, and that's kind of what we were looking at in terms of the time that must be right. has to do with the moon, the phases of the moon, and then being near a gray stone and being able to travel through the Fae. That was as far as and then what was the sort of, there seems to be a hub of sorts, Dan. What was the,
well, here's the thing
Mediterranean.
that makes me certain that the poems, at least, also would, in addition, would have to also be about the Doors of Stone, is because the um Lady Lackless, keeps him underneath her black dress, and the Black of Drazen, like in different languages, just like in English, black dress, black Drezen, tie together. In the other languages, the words are changed so that whatever they use in like German for like underneath her black dress, they Black of Drazen is changed to fit black dress in their language. So Black of Drazen and black dress are tied together no matter what the language is. They will change the name of Black of Drazen to fit whatever black dress is in another language.
Yeah, and that's a pretty insurmountable challenge, right? Because I've already said I put a lot of stock in some of the language thing, and so appreciate the folks out there that have that background and talent and can share that with us.
Yeah,
That's not something that I address in the theory. So I'm glad, Tim, that you asked. Like I've gone into all this detail. So what the hell do I think that part means, right? And so I said I'd have some extra stuff if you guys were interested in it, and
yeah.
that one is, as I think about the imagery there, seven things has Lady Lackless keeps them underneath her black dress. So if I'm saying that the seven things are the Chandrian, and Lady Lackless puts them underneath her black dress, is there a textual link to suggest that to be the case? And I'd point that to the scene where the Chandrian leave Quoth at the burning campsite, where they all seem to like sort of crowd around Haliax and then just disappear. Like he kind of shrouds them in his black cloak and they disappear. And there's all kinds of theory out there as to whether Lyra is one of the kind of the scions of the Lackless line, and what happens to her, and does she become Haliax? Is that the source of Lanray's phenomenal power? And so, I guess if I had to explain that in my theory, the seven things that she has under her dress is actually talking about this ability of Haliax to just enshroud and overroll the Chandrian and then get them, somewhere else. It creates some challenge for my interpretation that moves ghosts, move like ghosts from place to place as a Usnea connection. I'd have to think on that more to come up with a clever rhetorical dodge to get out of that trap that I've just set for myself. But hey, I'm honest about it, right? Like you said, there's some people with their theories where they are damn convinced that that Quoth is Ilian and also Haliax and also Princess Icing Bun the cat.
Yeah.
I'm straightforward on where I think I'm weak. I'm weak, and I'll be the first to admit it. And that's what's fun about this. But anyway, you've got the seven things underneath her black dress, but then you also have them standing before the Lackless door. And I'm wondering if that Lackless door or the Doors of Stone is not that same power that Haliax has. It's discussed nowhere else, that he can just enshroud them and make them all travel together somewhere else.
Yeah, I'm curious on, like, because it could be that the things that you're tying in, like on the poems, on the being part of their signs, it could be that the Chandrian plays some kind of integral role to get into the Doors of Stone. And it's hard to know exactly how that would work, because the Doors of Stone would have came before the Chandrian existed, because they locked. I mean, we don't know exactly, the time period, but it seems to be that they locked the big bad, likely Ajax, behind the Doors of Stone right after that battle at Drazen.
Yep.
So it's hard to say. It's hard to figure out like how the Chandrian would play into opening the door, or any aspect of the door. So It could be, but it also could just be that not only are the poems pointing to how to get behind the Lackless door, but it could also be that they are pointing to the Chandrian signs and to their betrayals. And so it could just be that whoever created it was layering in multiple bits of information into just one little poem that everybody would be able to read. And so that that would be the way I would tie the things together, where they don't all the pieces don't have to align to each theory, but it seems like, the Black of Drazentor has to play a role with the
Right.
black dress because of the way the books are written in different languages. So that would have to be the case, but it could also be that, all the stuff you're talking about is just another layer
Right.
in that
Or
book.
somehow interrelated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that again, linguistically, if and maybe I'm wrong, the internet will quickly prove me wrong on this if I am. Is the word Tor, if I recall correctly, like the Brandenburg Tor, the Brandenburg Gate. I believe that Tor in German means gate. So, one possible interpretation is that it's the Battle of the Black Dress Gate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, it would be referring to that Haliax connection with the cloak. But I don't know. The interesting thing is if they are related, right? If these are not two mutually exclusive theories, it opens some interesting things up about the Lacklesses. Because at the end of it, whether it's all these materials you have to gather in some kind of like Legend of Zelda fetch quest, or the Chandrian themselves, they're still under Lady Lackless's dress, or they're still
Mm-hmm.
standing at attention before the Lackless door. And one of the things I just listened last night, I think it was episode 6. You guys did, maybe it was 5. Sorry, I'm a fan, but I'm not quite
Yeah.
as I haven't quite listened to you 20 times.
Yeah. No,
So, but
episode 6 was the latest one.
yeah, and that's I think you talk about Abinthy and the conversation around the campfire.
Yeah.
One of the things that stands out to me is how much Lorien seems to know, and there's like this loaded background of her. Like, they've had the argument 100 times over, is it one sign or multiple signs and all this stuff. That she seems to be pretty confident. She still thinks Ben is crazy, or acts like she thinks Ben is crazy. But there's just some things that don't add up about Lorien either that kind of lead me to wonder: is there a Lackless Chandrian connection there? One, I've got the poem, and I think what I think about that. But she points out, she seems to have this knowledge that she's argued with Arleden about, and he says that he knows their plan. And if their plan is really to murder the shit out of anybody that finds anything out about them, what in the
Doesn't
world
make
is he
sense.
doing writing a song about them?
Yeah.
Why would you do that unless someone really, really, really influential in your life is asking you to do it? And that could be, the Lackless heir who's walked away from her family. And if the Chandrian hate having their name or their message out in the world, uh, and she's rebelling against her family who has some connection to them, that may be why the whole song gets started. Um, and it's there's a Lackless connection to that. I haven't developed that train of thought too much, and it
Yeah.
doesn't really explain why Denna, but
Well,
it occurred to me that could be why you're suicidal about your songwriting and have a wife who knows so much about the Chandrian.
yeah, it could be. And also, why is she changing her name to
Mhm.
Natalia?
Mhm.
Or changing her name to Lorien from Natalia. Like, she's obviously hiding from her family. Why did she run away? Like, she had a pretty good gig, and you could say, it was just love, but there's more to it than that, because they ran away and they changed her name, and there's so much animosity over it that there's got to be more to why she ran away from her family. So, and then when you got the secret with the Lackless box and Lackless door, it could
Right.
be that she she's trying to escape something.
Right. Yeah,
Something
she knows
sinister.
something, right? And even the way that she handles hearing the rhyme itself, is pretty interesting, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the same way that that Master Lauren deprograms Quoth in the archives of like, hey, this is not something that I ever want you to ask again. Kind of between the lines, like, don't ever look for this stuff again in my archives. She kind of does the same thing, like very gently, kind of manipulates him out of, I don't want to hear this again, and get out of this, because she recognizes what it is.
Yeah.
Right? One way or another, she hears a poem about Lady Lackless that, if nothing else, talks about the box with rocks, and is like, we're gonna go ahead and make you forget that.
So if I can digress for a little bit, if that is the case, what does it say about what's in the box? If the Lacklesses have some kind of a tie or alliance with the Chandrian, the box being one
it
that they
almost
can't.
it almost surely has to be something to do with opening the door. I mean, it's
And
like, 'cause
releasing something that would help
like
the Chandrian.
like, I mean, what the, because there's nothing in the books about an item um that is like, this all powerful item that people are looking for. There's nothing, there's no
Mhm.
talk about that kind of things, but there are plenty of locked doors. So you
Mhm.
would think, like, the most likely thing that would be hidden away is a key that helps you get into
One
something.
um,
I mean,
what
that's my best guess. I don't know.
one thing that sparked when you said, like an all powerful item, the only thing that and I think it's old Cobb talking about what Kavoth uncovered in the archives being a book of secrets, or a book of an unknown magic or something to that effect. I don't know.
Yeah, the box though that they describe, like, I mean, it's obviously, it's not in the archives, but it's
Oh,
not described as
you
like,
mean
something that would hold a book.
no? Okay, I meant if, say for instance, if inside that box is a key
Mm-hmm.
to unlock something of great power,
Oh, okay, yeah, I
and
know.
that possibly being whatever. I don't know. I'm swimming right now. You guys, uh,
No,
this
I
is
mean,
very
I think you're
satisfying.
onto something, Fitz. And the box they describe as having a key that that's like kind of just a straight poker key. And the mayor's like, you're just examining the wrapping, but what they're describing is something very similar to what the four plate door is like. The kind of the key that would be required for that. There's almost like it's a training ground. If you can solve the Lackless box, then you, as a result, have taught yourself how to open the four plate door, and whatever you would need is sort of your reward in there. I'm not making this up myself. I've read this other places, but the that's, I think you're onto something with that having to be an important part of it, because you know I think you're right. There's just too much similarity between that box and the door.
Yeah,
It does. It
yeah,
does.
they almost certainly have to be tied together. Like, there's got to be. I can't think of anything else other than the getting into the four plate door, because that box is going to play a role in the third book. It is, it's Chekhov's gun at this
Mhm.
point, so it has to come up. And the most likely scenario it would play is because they mention, like, there's the four keyholes, and it would make the most sense that key, and not necessarily that once you get in that opens the door, but I think it's probably a necessary step to get in.
Yeah, it
Although,
still fits with your version of the theory, because the box and the rocks, or whatever the rocks are part of the poem, right? So
yeah,
it's, yeah.
yeah, and because it also, it doesn't describe it as a key, like a keyhole, so it could be like, it's not necessarily a key, it's some object, a rock type object or something that is used. But, or maybe it's a copper, a copper object, and not necessarily a key or something, but that's what it is. But I would assume that that they're going to play a role, and those two things are going to be utilized together to open that door.
You know, and if I can just kind of extend that a little further, where we're at in the story after book 2, and assuming or knowing to some extent that Kavoth has opened the doors, I'm gonna bring back what I was just asking, and why is it that whatever Kavoth has unleashed on the world would help the Chandrian?
Maybe
It's just what I'm thinking about right now.
You know, I tend to think like that. Haliax. I don't know. Maybe they need Haliax to destroy the world, and so unleashing Haliax is important to their goal. I mean, in Haliax, translating, you know, as Hal meaning breath and in Latin, so you could take it as breath of Haliax. Maybe Haliax is controlling Lanre, and so he's trying to release himself. And you know, Lanre is not even really in control of himself. It's Haliax acting through him. So it could be something like that as well.
And yeah, there's a post. I don't remember whose it was, but I read it in the last week. Along the lines of, you know, Celatos is the one who curses Lanre, and he's one of the most powerful namers in the world. And there's, you know, and he's equated with Aleph, Lyra, and Ajax, and you know, at least one of them, you know, seems to be neutral to the Chandrian or anti-Aleph. Lyra seems to be dead. Celatos sure doesn't seem, after 5,000 years, ready to release Lanre or be in a position to release Lanre from the curse. But one of those people, we believe, is locked behind the doors of stone, and that it may be that they're trying to, you know, to spring the prison so that Ajax can come out and just finally straight up kill Haliax. He's the only person, or the only being with the naming prowess to undo what Celitos did, and that's what they're after. You know, that basically the Chandrian are just waiting to die, and kind of bring in that same 3-part silence theme of waiting to die. If both is a Chandrian, he would have that same, you know, kind of sort of existence. Again, not my original work. I wish I was better at citing my sources. But again, that's what's so cool about reading these things that, you know, people are posting up there, is they think of this stuff and it's like, man, now I feel smarter.
Yeah.
It does seem that way though. Like they're waiting to be released from their curse, especially if they're under curses, they have to be released from the curse, right? How could they do it? They can't. Obviously, they haven't figured out how to do it on their own.
It certainly seems like Haliax is. It's tougher to know what the motivations of the other ones are, because Haliax is clearly, you know, running the show. They're following his lead. It doesn't seem like if they decided they wanted to go off and do their own thing, that Haliax would let that happen.
Yeah.
And so like they're under, you know, they seem to be under his control. So I don't know. It's tough to say like what exactly is going on with the rest of the Chandrian, but you know, definitely Mr. Emo Haliax, he's definitely looking to end his existence. That seems pretty clear that he's tired of the world.
Yeah, it's super interesting how that ties in with with Kavoth. I mean, with the sonnets of 3 parts. I mean, that's the last part, is they have that in common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this guy. So this book's decent. We all agree with that, right? Like he's done a decent job.
Right. You know, he passes. Right.
It's okay.
Hey, I'm sorry I lost you for a second there, guys.
Yeah, we were just shitting on you the whole time.
Yeah,
so
we
it's
were
all
like,
right.
that was
You'll
so
catch
stupid.
up on that.
What else is new?
Yeah,
how's that different?
Yeah.
I should have been here for that.
Yeah.
But no, the last thing I wanted to bring up, was just along the same lines, is how does that all help the Cthaeh? Because the Cthaeh is the one who's leading the charge as far as sending Haliax, sending Ajax, sending Kavoth to their doom.
Just on my view on the Cthaeh, I don't see the Cthaeh as like the central force in the story. I just think he's like an interesting wild card in the story, where like this dude is just like this malicious, all-knowing character that he's playing a pivotal role in sending these people down this bad path. But I just think of him more as like he's just having fun fucking everybody's shit up. And so like not that he's like everybody is that he's just like a necessarily like a complete puppet master and they're all he's got this ultimate goal. I don't see him as like the person with the ultimate goal. I think I see him as like a chaotic character
Yeah.
that is just throwing the world into chaos every chance he gets. I just see him as more a really interesting character than the central character, central bad guy at least.
Yeah, I think
He
you
also
described that well.
seems, yeah, he also seems cursed as well because he's stuck, right? But yeah, he seems to be. I find him an extraordinarily interesting literary tool for someone to put in their story. Where yeah, he's literally just a creator of chaos, and you can sort of bring him in. And anybody goes to
It's
him,
like
then everything gets spun out.
It's like
Spun
the
out from him.
opposite of a Deus Ex Machina, right? Where they is that the right?
Yeah.
We're back in the
Like really fucked up the explanation or the pronunciation, but yeah.
well, pronounce it for me. Deus Ex Machina. I thought that's what it was
I-
called.
I don't I'm not 100% certain what you're
Which is
trying to
where
say.
in was it is it Greek where they would just send a god down at some point to lift somebody out of a certain scenario for no reason except to
it's that's the basics of it is like it's just this it's like a tool in the story where there's this ultimate power that is able to it would be like if Kvoth had the power to kind of just do whatever he wanted, and so like in any situation he's always got this power in the back of his pocket that he can pull out that magically saves himself and saves the story and saves the world, where it's like, well, that's cheap, that's not earned, you just wrote in this god power that saves everything, which you can
it's the
do,
opposite.
but
The Cthaeh is the opposite.
yeah.
He fucks everything up. He's this god power, but the opposite of a nemesis.
Well, it's interesting because he would know how to send you down the worst possible path for you in the world, but his power would still be limited because like how much damage can one person do?
From a
Obviously,
tree.
Kvoth and Lanre and Ajax can do a lot, but they can't. There's a limit to how much damage, even if he sends them down the worst possible path. There's still a limit to that damage that can be done. So the fact that he's locked in that tree limits the chaos he can create. But he's
Well, they have to
super
come
interesting
to him,
character.
right? But he's also in a tree that gives people like ultimate it's like a panacea, right? Like
Right.
yeah, so they're drawn to the tree to begin with, but then whatever he, influences them with, he has like this power of influence that spins them down that road. It's really interesting.
It is
I
interesting.
don't know if I've come across that before, but yeah, it's great.
It's a cool character. Yep.
I mean, did you have any other things you wanted to talk about, Rich? Or
I guess, guys, I'm just going to say, hey, thank you so much for the invite to participate, and I really enjoyed the show and what you're doing, and it's an honor to be the first guest or one of the first guests on here. I think
definitely first
if you want to, if you want some views though, get open source space on here, and I think everybody wants to figure out what is OSS's deal. Is that the layers guy, as you might know him from Reddit? I think we all want to know: is it a troll? Is it serious? Like, what's going on? And just have it explained to us. I think that's if there's one famous person who belongs in the Mount Rushmore of the community, I think we all love or hate, it's OSS. So
all right.
it's if you can get them on here, that'd be pretty cool. And thank you again for the opportunity. It's humbling and a pleasure, and it was a lot of fun because there's not that many friends of mine that are this level of depth or willing to listen to me talk that long about it. So I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, no worries. That's that's kind of part of the podcast that we wanted to bring in is like there's such a big community around it, so it's fun to talk about, and that's the fun of the podcast is we get to do that, and then we can bring other people on that got different perspectives and stuff. So yeah, it's fun. It was fun doing this and fun having you on. Appreciate you coming on. And
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Thank you very much.
Sure. Yeah, thank you guys, and keep up the good work. Keep going, and I'll keep listening.
All right, great.
For sure.
Awesome.
All right, folks. We'll catch you on the flip side, as the kids say. They still say that, right?
Yeah, no, they don't say that. I think they say lit. Say lit about
All
everything.
right, lit. It was lit.
It was lit. That's
All
better.
right. All right. Peace out.
Thanks, guys. Good night.
Thanks.
Yeah.